Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be my February wrap-up. I took part in both VaLITines and the Blacklit Challenge. This is my reading journal of the books that I read. It got a bit smeared because I dripped some water on it because I'm clumsy. And this is my little VaLITines graphic where I filled out the different prompts that I completed. And I got a bingo at the top, yay! And I'm going to run through really quickly the different prompts that I checked off with different books. So Love Shack I checked off with Tituba, Black Witch of Salem, which has a sort of townscape on the thing that I'll show you later. Black Future Month I read The Way to the Stars. For Goo Goo Eyes, both Legendborn and The Way to the Stars have really gorgeous covers. For Love Note, in my Cupid post, I talked to R. Jensen about how much I enjoy their work and how I've gotten really good book critiques from them, as well as the way I usually comment on people's videos and talk to people during months that aren't VaLITines. For Words of Affirmation, that was The Way to the Stars, because Sean McGuire blurbed that. Love Language, which is to read a translated book, I read all of those. Manga, and also Tituba. Spread the Love, I mentioned a fair number of bookish creators in my VaLITines vlog that first week. Skip a Beat, I'm pretty sure is the one where you're not supposed to know much of anything about a book going in, and I knew very little about Purple Hibiscus. Quality Time, a book that will take you a really long time to read, and Legendborn took me a really long time. It was 490 pages. Opposites Attract, I read outside of my usual genres with Purple Hibiscus. I used hashtag VaLITines on Instagram. Sharing is Caring, I also did other readathons at the same time and used prompts from the Blacklit Challenge. Bubble Bath, I took a bath and read in the bath because I like doing that. Acts of Service, Legendborn had a quest in it. Commitment Issues, Legendborn was also the beginning of a series. And First Date, to read an author you haven't tried before, and almost all of the authors I read this month I hadn't read from before. So the first book that I finished this month and didn't vlog about was Please Don't Hug Me, which is about a year in the life of an autistic girl trying to deal with the fact that her brother is not around. She writes letters to him and tells him all about what's going on in her life, deal with both her life and missing him, and so it's all in epistolary format, which is fun. And I felt like it felt pretty natural to epistolary format. There were some letters that were just explosions of feeling and that didn't make much sense, and they were told in an order that made sense, or how you'd actually write letters rather than how you would tell a story normally. So I really like that. I really like when epistolary narratives really lean into that format. It's also written by an Australian author and set in Australia, so the school year being flipped is because of that. And they also have some customs that we don't, like schoolies, which is a thing when you graduate high school where you go off and live on your own for like a week, and it's like prepping you for going to college, but apparently it's actually just a time when you go around and do all the things you're not allowed to do at home, which was quite startling to our main character. And yeah, when I was her age, if my friends had not told me outright that that's what we would be doing, I would not know, and I would not be happy with it. So I really liked how that was handled in the story. And grief is a really big part of it, and that was handled really well too, in my opinion, in a slightly different way than I've seen before, because everybody experiences grief differently, and I liked seeing how this main character handled that. And I really liked seeing her deal with losing old friendships and finding new friendships, and having a best friend that she got along really well with her whole life, and how sometimes when you grow up your dynamic changes. Oh, and I also finished a volume of Witch that I talked about in that vlog. Nightmare Arcanist is a indie book, and it's got a really cool magic system that involves magical creatures that bond with a person, and that makes them an Arcanist, and you get powers that have to do with your creature. So a little bit Pokemon-y, but also really original. A lot of elemental magic, but also transporting magic and mental telepathic magic. and those are really fun to explore. I really liked the two main characters and their dynamic. They were teenagers, I think like 17 or 18, and they are outcasts who are gravediggers, and nobody wants them to be bonded to the two phoenixes of their little island, so they have to figure out some other way to become Arcanists, and it sets them off on an adventure that I really enjoy. There's a little bit of magic school elements and secret bad guys, and the biggest drawback for me was the prose. It was awkward a fair amount of the time, and there was some repetitiveness a lot of the time, like things that were very obvious were outright stated a couple of times, and that kept happening throughout the book, not just at the beginning. So that was a bit jarring and just frustrating while reading, but other than that, for the world building, the characters, and the overall story, I really liked it and intend on continuing the series. Legendborn, I made a whole standalone video about. I just filmed it, but it's not out yet, so wait for that. It'll be coming out the Friday after the Tuesday this one comes out. But basically, it was freaking amazing. I love the magic system. I love all the characters. There's an abnormally large cast of characters that I really liked. And I loved all the big topics that were explored, as well as having a really, really likable main character who was still flawed, but in ways that were quite relatable to me. And I loved both her and her relationships with the other characters. And that's another one I'm looking forward to the next book of, which isn't coming out for like 6 months. Purple Hibiscus. This is a story set in Nigeria, and this one is I read for the Blacklit Challenge, because the author is from Nigeria, and the point of the Blacklit Challenge is to read books written by Black people from a variety of different countries. So this one was about a young girl, I think from the ages of 8 to maybe 12, maybe even 14, who has a fundamentalist Christian father who was raised in a very harsh way by, I believe, a group of monks or priests, and it's kind of about how fundamentalist Christianity is really bad, and how that mixed with colonialism has really harmed Nigeria. It's really upsetting to see my religion used that way, and fundamentalist Christians bug me a lot. But yeah, seeing that from the perspective of this young girl was really interesting, and seeing how that mixed with the culture of Nigeria that was already there, with the really, really bad patriarchy that was going on there. And then we also got to learn about local politics, about universities, and how there was a lot of corruption in universities where they became real power centers, and any of the teachers who didn't agree and follow along with what the main head of the place said had like the police set on them and stuff. Also quite a different perspective on Nigeria from what I got from Akata Witch and Akata Warrior, which also shows some university politics, but from a somewhat different perspective, and doesn't involve very much of that fundamentalist Christianity going on. But I'm glad to have like another perspective to add to that. And also I think that Purple Hibiscus was set back in maybe the 60s, whereas Akata Witch and Warrior are more present day. And it was very dark. There was child abuse, domestic abuse of the child's mother. There's a lot about social inequality and class and poverty, but overall it felt like quite a hopeful narrative, and I quite liked the direction it took. So I highly recommend it. It was very good. The stars and the blackness between them. I was somewhat aware that this was going to be a dark book, but I didn't look into the specifics of that. I very much did not know what was going on with this going in, except that there was a sapphic romance between the two girls on the cover. This is also really good, but also really dark, and I recommend you look a little more into it than I did before reading, but I did really like it. The first half maybe went really fast because it didn't get into any of that dark stuff, and I really liked the characters, and it was a very interesting narrative of this girl who her mother discovered that she was gay and was sent away from Trinidad, where she lived, to America, where her father lived, because her mother didn't want her to be around the girl that she had been with anymore. And then our second character being an American who had very liberal parents who were totally great with that, and who was currently kind of exploring her feelings for different genders. Really happy to take in and be friends with this new neighbor who moved in after being sent away from Trinidad, and they had a really sweet relationship, and then it was really a lot slower going for the rest of the book. But I did ultimately like the way that the dark things were handled and the way that the girls' relationship continued to grow, and I also really like the side characters. There is another set of lesbians, one of whom wears a hijab, and who are just really lovely friends of the American main character and become friends of the girl from Trinidad, and that was very precious. And also the American character's little brother, the way he reacted to everything was very sweet. Then I read the short story collection, Falling in Love with Hominids. This was really interesting. I didn't like it as much as some of the recent short story collections I've read. It was more like some of the older short story collections where the stories, a lot of them didn't end in a happy ending or didn't seem to really go anywhere and make progress. They were more of those literary, what is it called, experimental type short stories, and it was really interesting to read those and see the differences between those and the other short stories I've read, and the cool thing about experimental literature is that it tries new things and explores different ways of making stories and a lot of different ideas, and in the short story format it doesn't have to have this big infrastructure to hold it all up. It just explores the idea and then leaves. And so there are a lot of really interesting concepts in this one. Even though it isn't my favorite way of reading, it was very interesting. The Storyteller Secret is one that I read for my book club, and it was a lot better than last month's book club book. It is about a woman who has miscarriages and then goes off to India to see her dying grandfather, to try to rediscover her love of family and figure out where her roots are from, because her mother never talked about her father and her or any of her parents or brothers or any of her history in India. So to try to escape from the grief and discover something new to focus on, the main character goes off to India and learns all about the history of her family. And I really like the learning about her history of the family part, and also learning about India and both the history of India and also current day India, because she's learning about her grandmother's story and also current day, and the part where she travels around India and the part where she stays at the little village where her grandmother lived and meets the people there, and finds out about their lives. I really loved that part. I really didn't love the part at the beginning where she was super focusing on the miscarriages and was being a jerk to everyone around her because of them, where it didn't occur to her to adopt. Like, she really had to have a baby from that was biologically hers, and she was so focused on that she couldn't even conceive of doing anything else, and that bothered me a lot, especially when no actual reason was given for that. Overall, I'm glad I read it, and I would read more books by this author if they were not about miscarriage. Now we have all of these are Yonah of the Dawn, and I've read 7 of them so far. I have an 8th one on my floor, and some of those books that I showed you in my drawing of the books I've read are only partially finished, so I'll either be finishing them in the next few days, because this is the 26th of February, or I'll finish them in early March. And so I'll tell you about those ones in the March wrap-up. As I told you in my TBR, this story has a very dramatic setup, with the 3 main characters, 2 of whom are on one side and 1 of whom is the antagonist, have known each other from childhood. These 3 characters, redhead, dark hair, and blonde, and now they are suddenly on different sides of a war coup type thing. And that's how the first book starts off, and the stories after that are them fleeing for their lives, getting away from the coup because she's the princess of the country, and discovering the 4 dragon warriors who might be able to protect them, because them just on their own with 1 fierce fighter and 1 useless fighter, not able to stay safe very well. And I'm really enjoying the bodyguard trope, the princess trope, the banter back and forth between bodyguard and princess, and also the banter of the dragon warriors that we bring in, and a couple of other side characters who are very interesting and really cool. This story has like 35 volumes, so at 7 I am nowhere near getting done with it, or even the middle. But I'm really enjoying it. I like the magic of the dragon warriors, and also Yonah's character development is really interesting, how she learns to take care of herself and desires to take care of other people. Then we have Tituba, Black Witch of Salem by Maurice Condé, translated by Richard Philcox, and this is another one that I read for the Blacklit Challenge because Maurice is living in France and this is written in French and is translated, so that's a couple of points for the point system. And I was immediately drawn to this because it's about a witch, specifically an actual historical witch of Salem who was mentioned by name very briefly, only 1 sentence in the historical records, and so this is an expansion and exploration of who Tituba might have been and what her life might have been leading up to the witch trials and afterwards. And I'm really loving it. Really dark, a lot about slavery and the realities of it, and then the witch trials themselves were very violent, as well as the way that people were treated before the witch trials, with accusations and racism in general, and with more fundamentalist Christianity. This was, I believe, the Puritans, and how a few people who I suppose wanted power were not sure of the motivations, and was it mostly the fundamentalism, or was it people using fundamentalism to get power? Probably a mix of those, and how they scared everyone into being horrible to these women. But getting to see her life leading up to that and what might have led to her being there was really interesting. And right now I am 2/3 of the way through, hoping to finish it by the end of the month. And then we have 2 very short ones. First, Surviving the City, which I talked about pretty much everything that goes on in this in my dating history book tag, so I will link that below. But basically it's about marching for the end of violence against Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people, and about how they disappear all the time. I really like the illustration style and how it has these ideas of the spirits of other women and Two-Spirit people floating around the characters, and sort of looking after them, and that was really cool. Then Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth by Warson Shire. Interesting cover art, and this is a poetry collection that I also read for the Blacklit Challenge, and it has a lot of dark stuff in it about war times and the way women are treated in war, and about the nature of home when you move between countries, and the different ways that women handle difficulties in their lives, and I really got a lot from it. So that's what I read during the month of February. If you feel like leaving an emoji, how about a bow and arrow? I'd love to know what you've been reading this month, what you've enjoyed, and if you've read any of these books, what are your thoughts? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!